Hello, everybody. My name's Kate Sutton. I'm going to be the convener for this webinar. We're just waiting a minute or two just to see if anybody else is joining us, and we will be kicking off in a couple of minutes. So welcome. Okay, welcome everybody. We might kick off this webinar and hopefully a few more people join us. We've got a really full house already, so it's great to have you all with us. Thank you very much. There is a chat function on the GoToWebinar, so please, if you have any questions or you're having any challenges with logging on, please do pop your questions in there. Pip is online from Humanitarian Advisory Group and she will be able to help you out with anything. So welcome to this webinar that's being convened with a focus on women humanitarians, which is the main focus for World Humanitarian Day this year, which fell yesterday on the 19th of August. My name is Kate Sutton. I'm a director at Humanitarian Advisory Group and I will be the convener for today. So our hope is that this webinar can complement wider longer term initiatives at local, national, global levels to address the challenges that women face in humanitarian work. If I could just ask, sorry, as we're going along, if I could just ask people who are not speaking at the moment just to pop their microphones on mute, that would really help. Thank you. So the initiative for this webinar came from a coalition called Charter for Change. So the Charter for Change is a coalition of around 39 international NGOs and over 200 local NGOs advocating on localisation, which is transforming the way that the humanitarian system works to empower locally led crisis response. For this reason, we framed this webinar to focus on the specific challenges and opportunities faced by local women. So we're interested in hearing about and discussing the issues that face local women working in both the traditional humanitarian agencies, that includes national NGOs, but also working in women-led or women-focused NGOs. So we know that local organisations face lots of challenges and obstacles accessing resources and influencing decision-making in humanitarian response, but local women and local women's groups face additional obstacles. So we sort of call that a double kind of discrimination. But importantly, we don't want this webinar to be just about all the problems. We also want to hear about the solutions, so creative strategies and tactics that we as women in the sector can use to overcome obstacles and barriers. And this can be really basic, simple, practical things like how we and our employers deal with women's sanitary requirements whilst on deployments. But it can also be broader issues like context-specific approaches to addressing forms of discrimination or harassment around our role as women in societies and organisations in which we work. So hopefully we'll have a really good opportunity over the next hour and a half to explore all of those questions. The co-hosts for this webinar are Charter for Change, and I want to give particular thanks to CAFOD because they did all the practical organisation for this webinar, which, as you can imagine, is no mean feat. UN OCHA, Gender in Humanitarian Action platform in Asia Pacific, and Humanitarian Advisory Group. So the way this webinar is going to work, I am going to ask 3 questions of our invited speakers. For each question, the speaker will respond for about 5 minutes. And then we will also have a bit of a check of the chat box to see if anybody has any comments or questions. It would be lovely just to hear who's on the line and where you're coming from. So please, even if you just want to pop into the chat box, you know, joining you from Myanmar or whatever, that would be really lovely to hear from all of you. Although we won't be able to comment on every question that comes up or every comment that comes up, the webinar software allows us to keep a record of all of it. And so when it's completed, there'll be a recording made available online, and we will summarize any key points also in a blog on the Charter for Change website. We would really love it if you're able to share the webinar or the subsequent blog within your own organization so that the ideas that we generate today will inspire others for follow-up action in weeks and days to come. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. So our first speaker is Krishna Kaki, who's the Executive Director of the Center for Disaster Management Studies in Nepal. Welcome, Krishna.
Thank you, Kate. It is I'm very happy to participate this webinar on the occasion of International Humanitarian Day, and I would also like to wish all women humanitarian and congratulate for their noble cause. So as per your questions, like during my work with different organizations in UN, INGOs, and now working with local organizations, first and foremost challenges I feel and my colleague feel is a security concern for the women humanitarian. Like we face so many challenges during 2015 earthquake in Nepal, like when women humanitarian have to go to the work in the field in remote village where there is no safe hotels and there is no proper latrine and bathing spaces and there is no space to sleep at night. So they had many women humanitarian, they face many different kind of problems. So securities, and some are also like got a harassment and sexual violence, this kind of things they suffered during that earthquake time. And also what I feel is I realized that mostly management needs to consider the security concern and the biological matters of the women, such as their menstruation period, pregnancies, and other hormonal changes. That time women are need more support than the other men humanitarians. So that kind of challenges first. And there are some other challenges also I face myself and the other women humanitarian is in Nepal is like a lack of trust on the women's capacity in leadership positions. If we have a same like a 2 colleague and one male colleague gets more like a priority than the female colleagues. So that's very bitter experience I felt as a humanitarian. And another is like in the contextual, so women humanitarian gets less opportunity to upgrade their skills in different humanitarian contexts. For example, I work in different kind of natural disasters or human caused disasters like a flood, landslide, cyclone, earthquake, fire since 2007. But I never had an experience working with refugee context. So when I had to, as a humanitarian lead in my organization, when I had to work with a refugee in Bangladesh, I requested my organization to upgrade my skills, but I never got that practice, which gives me bitter pain. As a humanitarian, I struggle a lot. And like currently also another example I found from my colleagues, she was very good in humanitarian context. She was technically and professionally very sound, but due to her language barrier, the organization and management compel her to leave the organization. That was really, really bitter experience I found, and I tried to protect her, but I was not the decision maker, and it gives me still a lot of pain. And the very weak support systems, limited social network for the women, also get backward to the women humanitarian, and gender discrimination. Balancing life between professional and personal is another fundamental concern, like the country in Nepal, and working as a humanitarian is really challenging. And the family workload and pressure and other reproductive role and childcare, these are the areas we face a lot. I
Krishna,
think.
thank you so much. That is a really wonderful introduction to some of the issues that we're going to be able to unpack today, and particularly looking at those issues around security and the biological and hormonal issues, and just to hear you talking about the really bitter experiences in terms of trying to get into leadership positions and get opportunities. What I might do is just and then I'll give them also an opportunity to talk to that first question around what the challenges are that they see. The next panelist that we will be introducing is Zarqa Naphtali, who is a director at the Women and Children's Legal and Research Foundation in Afghanistan. I'll just go through all of the panelists first, and then A. Turi, who is the gender focal point at UN OCHA in Myanmar. And finally, Lamau Afamasaga, who is from the International Federation of the Red Cross in Fiji. So welcome to you all as well. Zarqa, I might go to you next and just ask if you can comment on that first question that Krishna was talking about in terms of providing examples that you have of challenges or obstacles that you have faced in trying to participate in humanitarian action, and whether or not they resonate with some of the points that Krishna's already raised. Zarqa, are you able to hear us?
Do you hear me?
Hi. Yes, we can hear you.
So
maybe if you could just
comment.
Yes, we can. Just commenting on that first question around a challenge or obstacle you faced, Zarqa.
Thank you, Kate. Good morning to all of you. It is my pleasure to be among all of you, and happy Humanitarians Day for all of us. I hope that we can do our best to remove the discrimination and obstacles that women are facing regarding to humanitarian issues, especially and all over the world, especially at the region level. About the obstacle and challenge that I faced during this year, as you know, in Afghanistan there is lots of challenge, especially security is one of the main and the big challenge regarding to all citizens of Afghanistan, especially for women and especially for those women that they are working for humanitarian and women humanitarian issue. As our organization, all of workers regarding to reducing of gender-based violence, and also reducing of discrimination in the society that women are facing with this discrimination in the society. So security is one of the obstacle and challenge that all women activists are facing with this during their working in Afghanistan. And at the program level, as you mentioned in the question, at the challenge that women are facing regarding to program, organization, and intra-agencies. At the program level, the main challenge that women are facing in Afghanistan is that there is not coordination between national and international agencies regarding to humanitarian aid, especially for women in Afghanistan, because all of the program is program at the international level, which when the programs are designing for Afghanistan, it is not designing in the community level. So we have different problems and obstacles in the community level, and then and when the programs are implementing at the community level, as they are not familiar with the challenge and problems that women have in the community. So sometimes the programs are not very successful. For example, the challenge, the obstacle that I faced, it was that there was some program women humanitarian, and it was about violence against women, and different donor was raised these programs. When we went to the community to implement these programs, and these programs was about the implementation of eve of law against women law in Afghanistan. So we saw that this program didn't have the impact that the need of the woman in the community. So for example, in the community level, there is different kinds of violence that we have in the community, but as the programs are designed in the outside the Afghanistan, and it was not familiar with the context of Afghanistan, so it was not very useful for the women of Afghanistan. And as a main obstacle at the program level, some months ago, there is a law in Afghanistan, and it is about elimination of violence against women law. So recently, the penal code of Afghanistan was drafted, and there was two groups of women that they have different demands from the penal code. One group they wanted to have the elimination of violence against women law in the penal code, and the second group that this was we asked it from the government of Afghanistan to have the eve of law as a separate court for all women of Afghanistan. So as there was different project at the program level in Afghanistan for this law, so it was very a challenge for us, for those women that they wanted to have this law as a separate law for all women of Afghanistan, but we at the organizational level, we establish a strong advocacy group, and which was I think it was about 30 or 35 different civil society organizations, women-led organization, and we started our advocacy with those people that they were at the program level of Afghanistan, and finally, we had our advocacy with the leadership of Afghanistan and also with the international community of Afghanistan, because this law is very important for all women of Afghanistan, and if this law went to the penal code of Afghanistan, it will be lose the strong value that already this law has for violence cases in Afghanistan. Those cases that women are facing violence, different kind of violence, and this law will be implemented on these women. And finally, among our strong coordination between civil society organization, we could bring the change. And finally, they accepted, the government of Afghanistan accepted, and the president of Afghanistan ratified that this law will be unique and will be not added in the penal code of Afghanistan.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that example, Zarqa. I think that's really exciting, and congratulations to you and the group that did all that advocacy work. And I think that sort of starts moving us also into thinking about what are the good practice and ideas that we can use for overcoming challenges and obstacles. So thank you. I might just move to A, if you're able to just reflect a little bit on the challenges and obstacles that you've experienced as a woman trying to participate in humanitarian action.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Kate. Thank you for having me, and also thank you for making effort to listen to the women humanitarians on this important day in the world. First of all, for the challenges, I'd like to start with this one, which is I'm a mother. I'm a young mother, single mother, and then I think that the struggle for a lot of working mother for the humanitarian sector is that the guilt that you always feel that you can't be with your kid for most part of the day because of your work nature. You are required to be working more than normal office hours sometimes. So I always feel guilty for my daughter for not be able to spend enough time with her, but she is very supportive. She understands her mother. She understands that I'm doing for the good of the people. So, but anyhow, this is still a struggle for most of the mothers to be working in this humanitarian sector. Another point I'd like to touch on is when you're young and when you are female humanitarian, especially if you have to replace your male colleagues, former colleagues' position, everyone would think that, I mean, everybody thought in the beginning that you were just an assistant, running around the government officials trying to get the approval. Nobody, thought you as a person from as an official from UN offices. It took a while to convince people that you are not just capable, and then like you deserve the same respect from the counterpart, especially the government counterparts. I even sometimes wonder that if I ever get the same level of respect that my former colleagues, male colleagues, had it when they did their job, even though we are doing the same job in the same position. Another thing I'd like to touch base on is the workforce. As you know, this humanitarian sector is still a male-dominated workforce, so men outnumber this workforce. Therefore, I think there is a widespread perception in the community or even in the sector that certain tasks can be done only by men, and it's only suitable for men. So I think that as a humanitarian, as a female humanitarian, you have to break, not just the glass ceiling, or also break those small barriers on your way which block you in achieving your goal to get the humanitarian access or anything else. And the last thing that I'd like to also touch on is that because as a humanitarian, and then let me give you here my background. I'm from Myanmar, and then I worked in the Rakhine State in Sitwe. I used to work there for 2 years, and then my hometown is Sitwe. So literally, I was working in my hometown. So professionally, although you grow professionally in your workplace, you are respected. But from your hometown perspective, you are still a local girl working in the humanitarian sector, which is a bit problematic in our context. There is a widespread anti-UN NGOs, humanitarian workers sentiment ongoing in our country context. So what the effect of this is that because of the work nature, you're so stressed, and then you have nothing, like you have no coping mechanism. Like every new day, you have new problems to be solved waiting for you, and then when you as someone also who day-to-day communicates with the government or several issues, I later on got burned out. I didn't know how to cope, and then later I found out that running really helped me in reducing the stress. So, but the challenge came here because running in Sitwe, the capital state of Rakhine State, which is a small city, it was very unusual for a local girl to be running like in the evenings. There were a number of times that I was actually harassed while I was running, and then it was like every day I went for a run. There was like every time I experienced this kind of sexual harassment incidents. I later on wrote an article in the local magazine about this, raising that this is a problem in our society, because I also heard from many people that international aid workers also receive unwanted sexual attention from the while they were running. So I voiced out. What happened was I got extreme criticism for speaking out because they already hate me for working in the humanitarian sector. And then now that I have an opinion and I have a reason to say about this sexual harassment culture in our society, they hate me more. So, and then in our society, as a woman, nobody had touched on this issue before. I was like the first person to raise about this sexual harassment in our home context. So I think they just hate me more and more. So they still hate me. Wow. Okay, that is my main challenge.
That's it's so wonderful of you to share so openly some of the challenges you've had, and incredibly brave, I think, for you to be speaking out on some of these issues, because I think that that's what needs to happen. But I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people when you talk about the guilt of a working mother. I know that that resonates very strongly with me, and gaining respect and the assumptions that are made about you. So you've raised some really important points. I just want to encourage everybody as we carry on, please do pop in comments, things that resonate, into the chat box. We are looking at what you say. I just want to say hello to Shamarel, who's joining us from Cardno, Chris, who's joining us from Queensland. Please pop in where you're joining us from and say hello so that we can include you in the conversation. I'd now like to open that same question around challenges to Lamau, from Fiji, just before we go on to good practices and ideas and how we overcome some of these challenges. So Lamau, over to you.
Thank you, Kate. I think I can agree with and I'll start off before I talk about the challenges, about the fact that we as women who are humanitarian workers are joining the sector with a whole package. We're a mom, we're a wife, we're a sister, we're an aunt, we're a community member, and we basically hold the community together. So one of the biggest challenge that I still think that it's taking away the opportunities for women in humanitarian programming to be in the center of decision making, in my opinion, is the lack of access to platforms that enable us as women to to be breaking those stereotypes, to be the voice of reason within the dialogue of programming, designs, and planning. We also have very little opportunities in a cultural setting, for example, and where I'm from in the Pacific, where men is mostly dominating the decision making. So we often don't have access to that opportunity to sit and to dialogue and to voice the opinion of women in a situation where we need to address some of the vulnerabilities as well as the capacity building for responding or preparing to a disaster. I joined the humanitarian field in 2009 after the tsunami back in Samoa that affected a couple of countries. And at that time, it was very, as A said, very male dominated. So I was the first female in the Pacific to become a disaster manager for the Red Cross. And at that time, when you talk about responding to a disaster, it's almost, you're the hero of the day, running outside the door and saving a life or providing whatever you can to the people who are directly affected by the disasters. So I think one of the key challenge for me at that time was to come in and look at how traditionally how the Red Cross at my hometown was responding and how I can be of an influence to a change that will benefit not just the ad hoc response, but really the institutionalization of a response mechanism that can go for years and be a sustainable system. I think the second one, like I mentioned earlier, is where there are cultural norms that we have to break through. That's also a challenge, and acceptance of women to be part of those cultural norms is usually when there is programs or when there is humanitarian interventions that needs to happen, and women are in the forefront of these interventions where culture is a must to be observed, and we are not allowed to sort of come in at first. So we always have to bring in the male colleague who has to do the ceremony beforehand in order for us to address the audience as we had planned out. And then I think the final one that I currently think it's one of the key challenge in the humanitarian sector as a women is when we have the imbalance of the women who are already in leadership but lacks the attentive, nurturing care and allowing the other younger women and other women who want to access the same opportunities. So those are my 3 or 4 main challenges that I can bring at this time during our discussion.
Superb. Thank you so much. And again, raising some really interesting points around cultural norms and how we manage that. And I thought that was a really interesting point at the end as well, Lamau, when you talked about women in leadership and how they promote and support other women to access opportunities. So thank you so much. I'm just going to flag a couple of things. One, just to say hi to Sarita, who's joining us from Nepal. It's lovely to have you on the line with us. We've got a couple of questions here. One is for A. So as the first complainer of sexual or the first person to call out sexual harassment you were experiencing when you were running, has there been any legal action or laws that have come into place against sexual harassment in the community or country? That was one of the questions that was posted. A, are you happy to respond to that now? Would you like a couple of minutes just to think it through?
It's fine. I can talk it right now. Thank you for asking this question. It's a very important question for our country because I have been receiving similar questions. In our country from the young girls who experience sexual harassment, but no idea about the laws and legal awareness in our country. The issue with our country is that we still do not have the comprehensive anti-violence against women law in place. We are trying, like the government and the CSOs are trying. They have drafted the bill, but still for so many obstacles and challenges are still in place. But I hope that it will come out really, really soon. In terms of the sexual harassment, we actually have a penal code 503, which says that you could go to jail like up to 2 years if you harass. There are explanations what does sexual harassment mean in the penal code. However, there are also challenges around it, because the definition in the penal code is not very clear to what extent, like if you are harassed sexually, you can report to the police and etc. and etc. That is one thing. That is one lack of clarity in the definition of the sexual harassment in the penal code. Another thing is the cultural challenges and the cultural acceptance of the sexual harassment behavior in our society. Especially it is in the city now, in the capital city of Myanmar. There are several anti-harassment campaigns are happening, but in the small town like Sitwe, Rakhine State, people still feel that it is it is not a serious issue. Why women making a loud noises on this trivial things. So the cultural dimension part is also silencing a woman who wants to report to the police. So it still is a big challenge in our society. So, but I'm very optimistic that maybe in our near future this will people will get more awareness about it. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I might just read out one other question and then we will move on to looking at good practices. So the other question was to Lamau, but I think it might also be something that others could respond to. So do you see any possible ways for women leaders to get opportunities and authority to promote and nurture more women to take their legitimate space? So what are the possibilities for promoting women to come up into those leadership spaces? And are there any sort of changes in the environment or in the space that we provide in humanitarian organizations to make that happen? And I might ask Lamau to answer that. And then when we go on to the next question, maybe the others can incorporate it into their responses to the next question. Thanks, Lamau.
Thank you, Kate. I think that there is the opportunities have increased in the last years for women in leadership to promote women in humanitarian sector to excel in the area. It's definitely moving. It's taken us as women accepting that there is a greater movement that needs to be gelled together to push for more opportunities for women. And with a lot of investment that has gone in by the development partners as well as the humanitarian sectors to increase the opportunities for women, I can certainly say that in the organization that I work with, it has increased a lot in the past 3 to 4 years. And it's coming from a place where women in leadership are not in competition, firstly. It's moved away from the territorial approach, but really looking deeper into how can be all in this together. So those opportunities has presented itself, and it has increased and it has changed the dialogue really from being oppressed or for younger generations of women humanitarians being oppressed because of their opinions or whatever reason that they cannot excel in their jobs. I think the other opportunity that has created a lot of platform for this to happen in this region is going back to the basics of cultural norms. There's a big movement of women who is taking their place, and you know, I say that it's not something new. It's not something that was introduced into our cultural setting. You know, women have always had their places in the cultural setting, and for us to realize that and take it with open arms is something that has created a lot more opportunities for the women in the Pacific to step up to these opportunities. The third and last final input that I would say that has created a lot more opportunities is the education of women is not just through the formal education. We've got a lot of opportunities in the humanitarian sector where we're talking to communities, we're allowing the communities to own their own issues and plan against their own issues. So we're no longer coming in with a colonial approach, but we empowering the local women. In the beginning, we are much more rooted in the communities, and the communities themselves are in the forefront of planning and making the decisions for themselves. So I think those are the opportunities that we have had in the past couple of years, and it's an ongoing progress for my region and also for the organization that I work with. You know, creating that space for women is becoming more and more of an opportunity.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Raman, for that question. And it's also great that you began to touch on working with the community and how to promote women in the community to take leadership roles as well. That was a question, a point that was also made by Sarita in the chat box. What I might do is just move on to the second question. So what I'd really like you to do, and I'm getting lots of comments about how lovely it is that you're using personal stories. So please carry on with that to our panelists. But if you could share one example of a good practice or an idea that you or other women have faced. And if you've seen any national NGOs or humanitarian agencies do anything practical or innovative to help address these challenges, it would be really good to hear those examples. And I might go to you first, Krishna, if that's okay.
So thank you for these questions. Okay, so as you said, we can unfold about the security concern, security issues and the biological issues. So what's my experience after having the different experience on the earthquake, during the Nepal earthquake and different kind of flood, and what women humanitarian face. Then during my work, when I work with Rohingya refugee, though it was on and off work, I was leading as a regional team, so I was frequently traveling. Then during the Rohingya refugee, what I thought, like a security measurement is a first and foremost for the staffs, especially for the girls, young girls, young humanitarian girls who we mobilize in the camps. So I set up the security measures. So provided proper orientation on the security measures, set up proper communication systems, and we made a travel arrangement for the staffs for daily commute to the camps with fixed times so that they felt more secure. So that's in the camp, inside the camp, like we made a provision to work in a pair, not alone, because the context was very chaotic, and the female and young, especially young workers were very like they were in the threat. So in that situation, there we arranged 2 female staff and 1 male colleague, so they were feeling more comfortable. So that kind of arrangement, they feel more comfortable. One example that we started in the Rohingya refugee, and another is like creating enabling environment for the staffs, like to share their problems, grievances, and any other kind of personal, like if they have a menstrual period or any kind of pregnancy, they can easily share their supervisor or female colleagues. So that kind of arrangement to share that their concern is also another practices we have adopted. And another is like considering this kind of things, like in Nepal I was working with involving in with different kind of network and coordination mechanism, and even I involved in the policy formulation phases. So I was addressing those issues to influence the policy makers to make provision to have a proper safety and security measures for the women humanitarians, and not only the government, even within the NGOs, task group and the UN ACT team. So I was raising those issues, so they are taking positively. And another what we recently is started is in Nepal, like we need such kind of formal forum to share our concern and queries. So in Nepal, recently we created Women Humanitarian Platform so that they can express their views, their thought without any hesitation and doubt. And this will enable them to articulate their experience and thought in better way. And the newcomers also, like that also, like if there is a senior humanitarian who have more experience nationally, globally and locally, the newcomers who started from the community level, they also can get opportunity to learn, okay, how to face those challenges, how to mitigate those challenges, and how to build their capacity. So creating forum is very important, what I feel. And then another, like one, if we like work in a team, like it's always benefit for us. So I feel is and another thing, what like creating positive environment or enabling environment or influencing other people, like we have to show our capacity, like women are more dedicated on their work than other. I cannot undermine the male colleagues also, but like they are very committed, and they are very like they are working very hard to get result, get things done on time. So sometimes we need to promote and encourage them, and sometimes to make a provision of award or appreciation for their good work is very important. These kind of things we are considering. And recently in Nepal, considering the challenges of women humanitarian as well as the women who are in the ground level, like affected women due to the disaster and conflict, we are conducting one research to know what kind of challenges they are facing. So I think this kind of work may help us in future to how to overcome those challenges. So these are the some experience and practices we are adopting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Krishna. Really practical. And I love the idea of a women's humanitarian platform to be able to share ideas and experiences. That's really powerful. Can I hand over to you to share an example of a good practice idea?
Okay, okay, where do I start? Okay, all right, I'm back. In my case, because I spent because my position is more like coordination and then the government liaison part. In the beginning, I did not have like so much experiences working with the women or CSO organizations, but later on, I had occasions that needed to engage with the CSO. But let me start with my personal experience first. What I believe is, I think it works for me, is that The first thing I like to touch base on is because in Rakhine, aid workers face enormous pressure because they are working and helping the Rohingya community in Rakhine. There is a wider perception that humanitarian organizations are only helping the Rohingya population, not necessarily the Rakhine population. So the CSO, there is like there are CSOs that who feel that they are not in the same cause. Those sort of situations. So like aid workers, they always face those remarks like you are always helping the Rohingya population, not us. Be it in the community meeting or be it in the government meetings. Those are the first comments that you receive, in a number of occasions. And even while I was doing my job, like while I was helping with the mission in Rakhine, I was often approached by the government officials or even civilians who try to teach me how I should be doing my job. It means that, you take side. So it takes a lot of courage for me to go out of my comfort zone, and to say no. That as a Myanmar woman, especially as a Rakhine woman, people do not expect you to say no. Like they wouldn't expect you to have opinion. So for them, I don't just have an opinion of my own. I also have a voice to say no. So then to say no often is not also easy. It takes like a lot of courage. But I took up my courage and consistently say no to these occasions where I feel that my principles are undermined. But I also managed to get the job done successfully. Here, I like to also send the message that often because I think that Rakhine context is a bit different from other contexts, where other contexts, humanitarian workers are often appreciated for what they do. But in Rakhine, you are not appreciated for what you do, although you believe that you are doing for the good of the people. So in my case, I often have to go back to the place where I come from and what my principles are, and consistently say no. So I think that in this case, believing in yourself and confident about where you stand, and then saying yes or no, where you want to say yes or no, in this kind of situation is very important for me. And then for me, it worked really well, because I often go back to my principles and why I do what I do. Although many people are saying I'm not doing the right thing for my community, because I'm Rakhine myself, so I'm not supposed to be, in their perspective, I'm not supposed to be working for the Rohingya population. And then the second thing is I just believe in humanity and human rights. And there are, based on the first thing that I mentioned, that I have a lot of criticisms even from my friends. My close friends, stay distant from me because of my work. So, however, I often think about where I stand and then try to believe in the human rights, and then continue working on it. And then now that the situation in Rakhine has changed a bit, like there is another layer of conflict in our country, in our place now. And then now that the Rakhine community is also being displaced and suffering, and then they start to appreciate now that the humanitarians work in the humanitarian community, although there is still a long way to go, but things are changing, and then humanitarian works are starting to be appreciated by the members of the society. So I'm so happy that I stick with my principles and the human rights. That's the I think that very good for a person, for also a woman who often are expected in your society to always listen to what other people say. And then here I want to also give the message that as a woman, you also have a right to say no, and you have your own. You also have the right to have your own opinion. So that's the personal story. Another question that about the CSOs is that it's not just the humanitarian workers who have pressure not to work for the Rohingya population. It also is the CSO who from the local community who also face criticisms or threats to work for the Rohingya community. So, but we as OCHA we tried. We try to find ways to engage with the CSO whenever and wherever possible. And but the sad thing is, when I was there were not many women CSOs who there were CSOs, but not many women CSO who would like to engage in this humanitarian work. But as you can imagine, the criticism and threats is so profound that for them, there is no incentive, but things are changing. I think I've seen so many NGOs now try to work for the humanitarian sector. So it is a good sign. And then it will also, there will also be many more, I believe, in the future to be engaging in this humanitarian work. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. And hopefully we can pick up a bit more on those issues around confidence and believing in yourself and how women have the right to say no and to stand up for what they believe in. I think that's so important. And I think the big question for me is also then how organizations support women to be able to do that, because there's obviously in a context like yours, there's a lot of psychological pressure that you come under in terms of being able to do that. So thank you for sharing such personal examples. Zarqa, it would be great to hear from you in terms of an example of a good practice or idea.
Okay, about good example of good practice, I want to share with you two issues. One is about a good practice regarding to preventing of sexual harassment in Afghanistan, and another is about women participation in the peace process. About preventing of sexual harassment in Afghanistan, unfortunately in Afghanistan we didn't have any law to prevent sexual harassment against women. Our organization and I conducted a research on 2015, and it was about sexual harassment against women and girls in Afghanistan. And one of our findings in this research was that in Afghanistan there wasn't any specific law and penal code regarding to sexual harassment. So we established an advocacy group, and it was about improved coordination regarding to sexual harassment in Afghanistan. And we can collected about 35 or 40 different civil society organizations that was leading by women in Afghanistan. And then we review all of the criminal code of Afghanistan, and we found there isn't any article to prevent sexual harassment against women and girls in Afghanistan. So we developed a regulation through this advocacy group, and this regulation was about preventing of sexual harassment against women in Afghanistan. So then through this advocacy group, we delivered and submitted this regulation to Ministry of Women Affairs, because there is a specific department in the Ministry of Women Affairs in Afghanistan that they are reviewing the laws through a gender lens. And I am member of this drafting law committee. So we review this regulation in this committee and then send it to Ministry of Justice to have their approval. So the Ministry of Justice had their specific comments and observation regarding to regulation, but we didn't stop our advocacy and efforts through this advocacy groups that were led with WCLRF, my organization. We had several meetings with Ministry of Justice, with the Parliament, Member of Parliament, and also with the Vice President of Afghanistan. And finally, the Ministry of Justice reviewed this regulation. And I think it was in September 2015. There was a senior official meeting in Afghanistan, and I was a representative of Speaker of Civil Society on this meeting. And one of the recommendations that we had through civil society in the statement of civil society, it was approval of this regulation. And fortunately, at the end of the day, the special cabinet meeting was held in the Kabul, and the Council of Ministers of Afghanistan approval this regulation, and now we have this regulation. But we see that the regulation is not enough to answer for all of the problems and challenges that women are facing regarding to sexual harassment in Afghanistan. So through this advocacy group, we drafted a law, and it is about anti-harassment law for women and children. And through the Commission of Women, Civil Society and Human Rights Commission of the Parliament, we shared this law with this commission, and this law had their comments. We went to their comments, and also this commission shared this law with all 18 commission that are in the Parliament of Afghanistan. Then both upper house and also lower house of Afghanistan approved this law and sent it for ratifying of the president. So at that time, the president of Afghanistan didn't want to ratify this law because there was some issue that some of the women groups said that we already have the elimination of violence against women law, and there is no need that we have the sexual harassment law. So through the advocacy group that I mentioned before, we continued our advocacy. We had analyzed the different articles of the law and share it with the different groups of women, and then we could find the unity of different women group in Afghanistan. And then the president of Afghanistan, after 8 months, he ratified the anti-harassment law, and now fortunately we have this law, and it is implementing in all over Afghanistan regarding to the cases that women or children facing with sexual harassment in Afghanistan. So this was one of the good practice that we had from the unity and solidarity among the civil society groups regarding to women humanitarian issue. And another good example of mine is about women participation in the peace process. As you know, the peace negotiation between Afghanistan government and Taliban will be started in the coming months. And we started our advocacy about 8 months ago when the United States Special Representative came to Afghanistan, and he wanted to start his negotiation with the Taliban in Afghanistan. On that time, he didn't have any meetings with the women in Afghanistan to hear the viewpoints and also the comments that women want to have in the peace negotiation in Afghanistan. So we started our advocacy, and we had several, and we have an advocacy group, and it is about women participation in the peace process in Afghanistan. Through this advocacy group, we done lots of advocacy in the national level and the region level, and also at the global level. So we had different press conference and drafted different press release that had position of Afghanistan women to have their demands and also their voices and the negotiation table. And we asked that from the government of Afghanistan, from the international community to didn't ignore the Afghanistan woman, and the Afghanistan woman should be set in the piece of negotiation. And we said that we didn't want to be in the back of negotiation, and we want to be in the negotiation table and share the voices and also the comments and the requests and recommendation that all women around Afghanistan has it. So the unity of Afghanistan women, not in Kabul but in all provinces of Afghanistan, could brought improvement and also brought change in the agenda of Afghanistan government and also in the international community. For the first time, the U.S. Special Representative met with some women of Afghanistan. I was one of these women, and we shared the recommendation and also the concerns that the Afghanistan women had for peace negotiation, and also about the meaningful participation of the women in the peace process. And also we had meetings with the leadership of Afghanistan, and the leadership of Afghanistan government promised to us that the woman achievement during the 18 years will be the red line for Afghanistan government through and the negotiation table. And as we see in the last negotiation, which was held in Doha, there was 14 women from different, from civil society, from government, from Parliament of Afghanistan, that they were in the negotiation table. And also through the Women Regional Network, I am board member of Women Regional Network. We had our advocacy in the region level, and we drafted a letter from through Women Regional Network, and submitted this letter to the Congress of United States, and we got the support of 79 members of Congress of United States, that they emphasize to the government of US that they should not ignore women in Afghanistan, and they should be take care the achievement that the Afghanistan women had during the 18 years. And our main slogan for this campaign was that the Afghanistan women will not go back. So now we have a list of women that they are in the they will be in the negotiation table with government of Afghanistan and also with Taliban, and they will be shared the demands and requests that all women of Afghanistan will be have from the peace negotiation, and about the role of women during the implementation of peace agreement in Afghanistan. And recently we started another campaign, and it is about ceasefire in Afghanistan. And the campaign is Afghanistan women. Afghanistan people want ceasefire first. So we hope that through this through unity of Afghanistan women, we can come to a ceasefire in Afghanistan in the coming months.
Thank you so much, Zarqa. They're two really concrete and very exciting examples of what advocacy can achieve. And I think, you know, the words I picked up as you were talking were the ideas around unity and solidarity. And if that takes place across provinces in a country, what can be achieved is quite incredible. Thank you so much for those examples. Lamau, can I hand over to you to share an example of a good practice idea, please?
Thank you, Kate. I think I only have a few concrete examples from the Pacific as well as from the Red Cross movement. The fact is, we have our traditional methods of consultations and separation of women groups and creating those platforms in all levels of society. And I think that's an important thing to keep reminding ourselves, that this is not just at one level. We have to address these at different levels. So I can use the example of my home country, where there is a move to increase percentage of women in parliament. And that is the work that is advocated through the disaster laws and the involvement of our humanitarian sector to increase participation of women in parliament across the whole of the Pacific region. So there is definitely some countries that has progressed, that has increased, and has now increased the percentage of women in parliament. The the example of trying to address more women into leadership and more women into decision making in the Red Cross movements is done not only at the global level but also at the regional level, and as well as right down to the community level, where we have now Women in Leadership program, which encourages globally women who are in leadership who can foster or nurture a peer-to-peer exchange between one national society and another national society, to learn from each other and to look at what are the common challenges that these women in leadership have and how they can interchange the solutions as well. In the community level, as well as the regional level, the organization Red Cross has what we call a Pacific Gender and Diversity Network, and it's a network of not just women, but a diverse group that wants to invest technical interest into development of the tools, because we know that we can be very passionate and talk about the involvement, participation, the access of women, and sometimes it can become a little bit too noisy, and that the audience or the ones that we want to challenge can no longer hear what we're trying to say. So one of the approaches that we have tried to do in the region is to look at how we can champion a group of network technical gender diversity and protection and gender inclusion, volunteers and staff who have the interest as well as the technical know-how on integrating some of the practical ways of including women in program designs or planning or assessments and so forth. So we've the network was established in 2014. It had its first meeting in Fiji in 2016, and one of the biggest achievements or impact of this network is the establishment of institutional capacity within the national societies that we work with in the Pacific. And we're talking about one person who looks at the integration of the tools and the mechanisms that are in place, so that that there's a checklist that each of the program technical teams, like whether it's health, whether it's WASH, whether it's shelter, they have now the tools in place that ensures that there is a mass participation of women in the decisions and in the planning in all the programs that they do. So the job of this network is to ensure that we're contextualizing also some of the materials that we use to not, we need to sometimes also change the dialogue in the language so that we can draw the attention to a much more positive environment. So we take what is global and we contextualize it to fit the Pacific context, and we share it amongst the different networks. So in the Red Cross, there is a network in the Pacific, there's a network in South Asia, and there's a network in also Southeast Asia. So at times, the coordinators such as myself and the other colleagues in the region, in the Asia Pacific region, do have the opportunity to share that globally as well. I think, what we have done is we have challenged the norms through the legal frameworks. We've also looked at the different policies within the organization, but at the same time, look at how practically a volunteer or a woman that is part of a group of network in the village can be part of these information and trainings that the Red Cross offer. So those are some of what we have done that that addresses these challenges.
Wonderful, thank you, Lamau, and some very concrete ideas around specific leadership programs or approaches to establishing networks that maybe people can draw on. Before I go into my last question, I just want to highlight a couple of comments that have been made and questions that have been made in the chat box. Not that we're necessarily going to be able to answer them all now, but maybe for the panel, just to think about the questions as I'm asking them and see whether or not you can maybe address them in the final question in some way. There was a really interesting point from Roman, which was around how are men involved in solving some of the questions, and particularly the points that were raised around respect and gaining respect in the workplace, and what can men be doing to support that. There was some great contributions from Bebby, thank you. One of the questions relates to what happens when women have maybe the best experience and skills, but due to their English language barriers, they end up not being hired. And I think that goes back to some of the points that Krishna made very early on in terms of whether or not women are given opportunities for training in their jobs. So it would be interesting if any of the panelists are able to address that in the next session. And as a final point that came through as well from Kailash, thank you Kailash, asking about how the involvement of women in response makes a difference to women and the challenges that they face in communities. So does it make a difference having women humanitarians feature more prominently in the work we do, and what does that difference look like? So some really fabulous comments coming in there. Thank you so much. Please, as we go through this last section, we've got about 15 minutes left. Particularly if there are bits you very much enjoyed or comments you'd like to reiterate, please do pop them into the chat box. We are looking at it and enjoying your feedback. So going into the last section, as I said, we only have about 15 minutes. So what I'd ask the panelists is just to share one key idea or point in this final section. But what I'm interested to understand is, what is that one idea for joint action or collaboration, something that we could be doing together as a sector to overcome some of those obstacles and to support local women to engage in humanitarian work? And I will put that question first to you, Krishna.
Thank you again, Kate. So maybe I will give 2-3 joint actions in very brief. First, bring a women humanitarian together to discuss on humanitarian issues, women humanitarian issues, which directly and indirectly impacted them, such as creating women humanitarian platform at different level, like a local level, national and regional level. Like in Nepal, we have started this platform recently and have planned to create at sub-national and local level. So this platform can also do advocacy to promote women humanitarian leadership. And also it would be good if we create such platform in the regional level so that women humanitarian can learn from each other first. Second, organize capacity building programs such as training, exposure visit, or cross-learning, etc. at different level of women humanitarian at local, national, and regional level. For example, in case of Nepal, we have 40% women representatives at local government, and they can play a vital role at local level to promote women humanitarian at local level. So it is also necessary for the women humanitarian like us to upgrade our skills for different sector in the humanitarian different contexts. So promote community level women volunteers is also another key actions to build the capacity, like women are involved in the different community level or local government or regional or national level disaster management committees, but their skill is still they are lacking on the skills, so we can promote. Then another is develop the resource pool so that they can work as a change agent and generate the evidence like create the forum to for the storytelling and share the human interest stories, best practices, and resource like this. So one thing is I have still we are advocating talking about the localization and a lot, but in reality, is there appropriate resources is really going to the local or national NGOs or not? That is his question, and especially the organization, those organizations leading by the women humanitarians is still challenging. So we need to address more on the localization issues to promote women humanitarian. So these are my more highlighting point is create the platform and build the capacity. Like as baby already asked about the language. So within the capacity building programs, if they are technically sound, we also need to provide language skills also. So these are the key some joint actions we can do in future. Thank you.
Superb. Thank you very much. That's a really helpful summary, Krishna, of the key issues. A, could you provide your response on your one idea for joint action or collaboration?
Absolutely, Kate. In Myanmar, we have one key collaboration that we have been working on is rolling out the Gender in Humanitarian Action trainings across the country. So starting this initiative, we 7 of the 6 or 7 women humanitarians got the TOT trainings in Bangkok, and then we roll out the trainings, and then later on it became like UN Women, UNFPA, OCHA collaborate, co-led trainings in the across the country. So far we have had at least 6 or 7 GiHA trainings throughout the country, especially in the humanitarian hotspot. We train the humanitarians on the gender and in humanitarian action, and why gender is important in this humanitarian action, etc. We've trained like more than from the CSO side, more than 120 participants have been trained by us. So it is one of the good collaboration between UN agencies and also other inter-agency organizations. And then in 2019, we realized that the resource person, especially for rolling out this kind of training, that the language barrier is also always a problem. So we want to have many local women, I mean, not necessarily women trainers, that were local trainers. So we had the TOT in Yangon in around March. So we had like 40, nearly 40 now trainers now who are now ready, who have started rolling out in humanitarian crisis areas in Myanmar. So recently in Rakhine, we had like CSO only trainings in GiHA, so which is a very good initiative. So we also have a 1-year GiHA action plan among the agencies, mainly also by the OCHA, UN Women and UNFPA, because as OCHA we believe that gender is the collective responsibility. And then in all these trainings, we try to reach out to CSOs as much as possible, and then we in all of our trainings, we try to have the CSO engagement, like panel discussion and in the middle of the training, and then give the message that we are in this together, and then not just the UN agencies, CSO also are on the same page, especially the women led CSOs. This has been a great initiative and collaboration, and then we are also ongoing these activities. So I like to highlight that as a good collaboration between us. Thank you. Over to you.
Great example. Thank you, A, and talks very directly to that capacity building and training. Thank you. Zarqa, can I ask you just to give one quick example of an idea for joint action, please?
For joint action, I'm pointing to at local level, national level, regional and international level. At the local level, we should build the capacity of women at the community level that Afghanistan is in conflict, and there will be crisis from conflict. So we should build the capacity of women at the community level, and then find the need of women from them and the community level, and also in the national level we should have the unity from between the civil society organization, especially between the women rights organization, and at the joint collaboration. I think if we have different events, side event, and like this webinar with different countries representatives, so we can know from the situation of women humanitarian issue in different countries, and then we can think about the way that how we can implement the good practice, and also the good lesson learned that other country would have in the different situation for the woman humanitarian issue. And also about one of the recommendation for joint collaboration is that if we want the unity and also the solidarity of other women in the around Afghanistan, around the regional and also in the Asia Pacific, to have their solidarity and support for Afghanistan women regarding to Afghanistan women participation in the peace process. And we want to have joint efforts and joint activities at the region level with the woman for woman participation in the peace process.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And again, drawing on those ideas of unity and solidarity, which are so helpful. Limau, your final reflection on an idea for joint action or collaboration, please.
Thank you, and once again, thank you for having me on this panel. I think I cannot stress enough what importance it is for us as women, like you said, to to join together. I think one of the joint collaborations idea that I can share, and it's definitely impacting a lot of the work that we do in the Pacific, is the peer-to-peer support. Peer-to-peer from one country that is similar to another country makes a difference. And it's done in a nurturing environment where women can peer support another colleague in the humanitarian field. And I think if we allow ourselves to be mentors and be nurturers of each other, then there is, there's nothing that can come against us. We can become superwoman. And in reference to what was said earlier, for women to be involved in response, and what difference does it make if they see the solidarity, if the beneficiaries see us women, they're much more open, they're much more lenient towards discussing with us the real issues behind what the eyes can see. Women can see, past the damaged house, past the broken pipes, past the broken roads, and really look at the emotional and the mentally or the intellectual impacts of a disaster. And whether it's a family or just a community or a small house on its own with a few beneficiaries. Because as I said before, we bring the whole package when we are doing our work. We're not just humanitarian workers. We have the whole package with us when we're doing our work. And I think that's the difference when women are involved in response. So we are much more thorough in thinking what could go wrong. But also we're much more stable in ensuring that, you know, there's a few things that you can put in place to prepare yourself before the worst hit scenario happens. So for me personally, those are the key differences, and those are you know, my input into some sort of joint collaboration. We can do a lot more peer-to-peer, not only in each of the regions, but also globally. We can do peer-to-peer where women in leadership can learn from each other, and we can look at being nurturers of future humanitarian women leaders in this field that we love and are passionate about. So thank you once again for having me. And I hope that the contribution of the Pacific humanitarian women through myself.
Thank you so much, Lamel. That's really wonderful reflection to finish up on. And I guess what I would like to just quickly do now is summarize some of those wonderful ideas that have been given, and in Lamel's words, to help support us as super women in the humanitarian field. There are 4 sort of key areas that I pulled out for ideas that could be used across organizations. One of those relates very much to the practical changes, and Krishna spoke a lot to this, practical changes that can be made to travel arrangements or security arrangements to create enabling environments for women to be able to safely engage in the humanitarian space. The second area relates to networks, and we had some beautiful examples from Zarqa and Krishna about this in terms of creating, for example, a women humanitarian platform or advocacy groups that can really bring women together to be able to support each other in unity and solidarity. The other area that was mentioned relates very much to specific programs, and Lamel spoke a little bit about this in terms of both capacity building programs, but there was a reference to the Women in Leadership program that is undertaken in IFRC, which allows peer-to-peer exchange. And then there was also some training and capacity building that was going on in Myanmar as well to support that capacity and specific programs for women. I think the other point that I just really wanted to emphasize, which resonated very strongly with me, was the piece around the psychological piece. How do we ensure that we are confident? And A spoke so eloquently to this in terms of ensuring that we believe we have the right to say no, believing in ourselves and having self-confidence, and initiatives that organizations can take to support women to understand that they have those rights are incredibly important. So I just want to finish off by thanking our brilliant speakers so much. Krishna, Zarqa, A, and Lamel, you've all given so much of your own personal experience, which has brought a real richness to this discussion. So I'm incredibly grateful for your time. And also thank you very much to all the participants. It's been wonderful to have people writing into the chat box. Thank you for your contributions. CAFOD, on behalf of the Charter for Change, will be uploading the recording of this webinar onto its website, which you can find at charterforchange.org. And UN OCHA will also be sharing the recording over social media. So please look out for that. Share it with your organization. If your organization has not yet endorsed Charter for Change but would like to, or like to find out more, please get in touch. All the email contacts are on the website, and we look forward to any contact from any of you. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.